yet to ascend to the absolute divine level of hog crankery that is naked sport bikes? Well, today I am going to teach you about why naked sport bikes are the supreme choice for the sophisticated hog crankers that like to get a little sporty on the street. But before we get into that, howdy hog crankers, my name is Jeff, you are watching TrashWerks, and today we're going to be talking about sport bikes versus naked bikes. And hopefully by the end of this video, I will have convinced you to ditch your ZX6R and instead get, I don't know, like an MT-09 or something. We'll see. Before I dive into the old meat and taters of the video, I'm specifically going to be talking about the context of street riding. Specifically legal street riding. You know, good boy time. Not being a little felonious squid out on public roads. Getting spirited here and there, but for the most part, sticking to the laws of the land. Because yes, sport bikes are 100% better performing track machines and highway roll racers if that's what you're really into. And why might sport bikes be better performing track weapons? Well, because they're designed for the track. Big shocker there, I know. But when we consider the needs of riding on the road, on the street, sport bikes start to fall a little short. And naked bikes, they start to creep their little way in. Well, you might ask yourself, why do naked bikes fit street needs better than a sport bike would? And well, the short answer is naked bikes were designed for the street. And this came about in sort of a weird roundabout way. And so I think a good place to start with the history of naked bikes. And so to think about the history of naked bikes, the first place that we have to go back to is this far, far distant time called the early 80s, late 90s. Basically the prehistoric era. And so in the late 80s and early 90s, sport bikes had sort of just become their own category. Before then, manufacturers were really making either cruisers or what are called standard bikes or upright motorcycles that are good for just about anything that you could need. And sport bikes until that time had really just been standard bikes, but with an excessively powerful and quite frankly dangerous motor put in it. But as manufacturers started caring more and more about their racing prowess, they started developing race-specific motorcycles that they can then release to the public. A lot of this coming from homologation rules. And so that's when we start seeing a dedicated sport bike. And these sport bikes, they were different from standard bikes, not in just how well they performed and how fast they were, but also in their ergonomics. So sport bikes had clip-ons that attached directly to the fork tube. They no longer used handlebars, and those clip-ons were folded back so that when you are leaned over, it is easier for you to maintain a neutral wrist position. They also had rear sets that were set up higher and further back so that when you're leaned over, you have more ground clearance. And so you've got these sport bikes, these absolute track weapons. They're the fastest things around, they're the most agile things around, and most importantly, they look cool as heck. They were the bee's knees. People wanted to have these things, but naturally, as you start getting more people on a motorcycle that is less and less forgiving, naturally, people start to crash them. Anyone who has dropped their sport bike knows that the two main repairs that you're going to have to do are going to be on the clip-ons. In this case, I have a handlebar, but on sport bikes, you have clip-ons. Those will typically fold in or they'll just break off entirely. And you will also have to replace the fairings on the side of the bike itself, because when you drop it, that's going to be what contacts the road. And so now let's pretend I am one of these riders in the 90s. I've crashed my sport bike that I spent way too much money on and I probably shouldn't have bought. I've got to replace my clip-on. I've got to replace my fairings. Maybe I even also have to replace my rear sets. What do I do then? Well, it's a little hard to find replacement parts. These bikes were brand new and for the most part basically just homologation specials. So it's hard to find clip-ons. But guess what it's not hard to find? Handlebars. Handlebars had been on motorcycles and bicycles for, well, I don't know, like at least 100 years by that point. I mean, even you look at penny farthings, they've got handlebars. So it's easy to find those, and they're relatively cheap, even nowadays. So instead of replacing my clip-ons, let me just take those off, put a handlebar on my bike, and wouldn't you know it, now my bike is a lot easier to handle. It's a lot more comfortable when I'm just riding around on the road. And now what about the fairings? Well, anyone who has had to replace a fairing knows exactly how much of an absolute pain in the ass it is to replace a fairing. They're overly expensive, they're hard to find, and they're usually pretty complicated to get on and off. So these riders back then just said, whatever, I'm going to leave them off. I'm going to keep my bike naked. Essentially done is you've taken the premium, top-end sporting machine at the time, and you've made it usable for the road. You're not forward swept with your chest. You're sat upright. Your arms aren't tucked anymore. You're neutral. And manufacturers caught wind of this. They saw what everyone was doing to their bikes, and they decided, why don't we just sell this package from the factory? And so that's where naked bikes come from. They are sport bikes without their fairings. They are naked. And so one common misconception a lot of people have about naked bikes is that they're not sporty, but they are, because at their essence, they are sport bikes. But obviously, they're not as sporty as a sport bike is. And so here's where the hot take comes in. Yes, sport bikes outperform naked bikes. Yes, they have that extra 10 or 20% more performance than a naked bike does, but that's on a track. Are you going to eke out that last 10 or 20% of performance or riding around on the road? If we're being really real with ourselves right now, you're not going to squeeze out that last drip of performance on the road, because that's not what sport bikes are meant for. However, that is what naked bikes are designed for. They are designed for the street, so thusly they are the better street bike. And it goes well beyond performance too. That extra 20 or 10% of track performance that sport bikes have over naked bikes have 30, 40, 50% more street ability than sport bikes do. Probably the most glaring difference between sport bikes and naked bikes as it pertains to street riding is the comfort. Sport bikes may as well be sleeping on a concrete floor, no sleeping bag, as opposed to naked bikes having a bed with a plush mattress, and the covers are just so nice and snug and warm. These things are so comfortable for the road. And the main differences for that are going to be the ergonomics on the hands, the ergonomics on the feet, and how that interacts with your body position. So most sport bikes have a pretty long tank. With that means the controls are set further forward. So instead of staying pretty upright like I am right now, you shift that up 2 or 3 inches, and now your chest has to go farther forward. That's why you always hear people complaining about back cramps when they're riding sport bikes and always having problems with hurting their wrists. It's because they're putting all their weight there and they don't have that core strength yet. Naked bikes, you're naturally upright. And then if we think about the foot position, naked bikes have their pegs set further forward, and they also have them set further down. So you do lose ground clearance on nakeds, but you can still drag knee easily on a naked bike. And so put that all together, and you have a much more comfy bike. You're sat upright, you've got very neutral controls, both for your hands as well as for your feet. You are not that super sport rider who has to stop every 50 miles because you've got a hip cramp or you've got a backache. And probably one of the biggest things that people forget about what makes naked bikes such a better street option is that cash money, dude. People always forget that bikes cost money. In fact, most people forget that it costs more money than they can really afford. Naked bikes are significantly cheaper than their super sport counterparts. And you're typically going to get as many features, if not more, than the super sport counterparts, especially if you're looking at the 600cc class, because a lot of manufacturers are neglecting their 600s, but they are not neglecting their heavyweight nakeds anymore. Just look at Kawasaki's new 2020 2025 Z900. You get a 6-axis IMU, you get Olin suspension, you get radial-mounted Brembo brakes, all of that for cheaper than a ZX6R with ABS, which doesn't have the Brembos, which doesn't have the Olins. And then not only is the bike itself cheaper, but insurance is cheaper too. Insurance is so cheap on naked bikes. For an example, I'm 29 years old. I live in the burning state of Florida, and my 6-month premium for just the mandatory requirements of what we have here is $50. $50 over 6 months, and I am legal. And if you're one of those people who say, well, just don't insure your bike, stop being a degenerate, if your law requires it, just do it. $50 over 6 months, that's less than $10 a month, and I'm legal. So while I only have to pay $50 every 6 months, compare that to what a Supersport has to pay. Ask anyone who rides a Supersport how much their insurance costs. It's not going to be $50. I guarantee you that. And another place that you'll save money with naked bikes is on labor. If you don't work on your bike, if you take it to the dealership for labor, the rates are cheaper because they don't have to spend time taking your fairings apart and putting them back together. If we compare the process of doing an oil change on a Supersport, where you typically have to remove maybe a belly pan and a lower fairing before you can gain access to your drain bolt and your filter, on this bike, everything's exposed. I don't have to remove anything. I put it on the stand, I undo one bolt, I undo the filter, I put it back together, I fill it back up. That's it. That's all I have to do. It takes me 15 minutes to do. Super easy. So labor will be cheaper, insurance is cheaper, the bike itself is cheaper, everything is cheaper on these bikes. And you still get every ounce of performance that you're ever gonna eke out on the road. And one of my little secret aspects of naked bikes that a lot of people really don't think about is that naked bikes don't really attract any attention from the police. Cops don't know much about motorcycles. Their basic thought process is cruiser probably won't run, is slow. Sport bike probably will run, is fast. They don't know what a BMW GS is. They don't know what a Yamaha XSR 900 is. If you're on a Supersport, cops are likely to profile you. They're probably going to think about pulling you over. But if you're on a naked bike, have you seen what riders look like on naked bikes? You look goofy as hell. So by and large, cops don't care about naked riders. You're not seen the same as a Supersport rider because you don't look fast. And that works to your advantage. And you might be one of those people that say, well, if a cop tries to pull me over, I'm just gonna run. My man, I'm in Florida. The troopers here will 100% run you off the road at 50, 60 miles an hour. In fact, the troopers here in Florida will sacrifice an innocent bystander so that they can catch you, tackle you off your bike, arrest you, and then give you a talking to in the back of their car after they've put you in handcuffs. Florida troopers are insano mode, all right? In the years that I've been riding and all these miles that I put on this bike, I haven't once had the police try to pull me over. And so the last thing that makes naked bikes more usable for the street is going to be their power band and their gearing. And so what you'll typically see with power bands, specifically for 600cc Supersports, is it'll start low, it'll start going up, and then towards the top of the rev range, you'll see just a really big spike. On a racetrack or on a track in general, you're going to be spending most of your time at the upper end of your rev range. You're not going to be spending too much time down low, and that can cause some issues with 600cc riders, especially riders who may not be that experienced. They're coming out of corner, they're just trying to give it wide open throttle, they hit that power spike, and now all of a sudden they're low siding or they're high siding because they lost rear grip. Whereas on naked bikes, since they are designed for the road, you'll see, I'll show you the power band for this bike in particular. I've taken this bike to the dyno, and you can see the power band is basically a straight line. It starts down low, it goes straight up, it's very predictable. Where I'm at in the rev range is going to determine how fast I go. And then on top of the power bands, Supersports typically have really tall, really long gears. Think think about leader bikes, where their first gear can go up to 100 miles an hour. That will not happen on this naked bike. And so to give you an example of what that low-end torque and that gearing for the street does and how that makes a difference, well, just look at it right now. I'm going 43 miles an hour in fifth gear at about 3,500 RPM. If I need to speed up 10 miles an hour to do a pass or a maneuver, all I got to do is just a little, and look at that, I'm already there. And having that low-end torque and that gearing for the street makes it so that you're less likely to stall out. For example, let's look down at my dash right now. I'm in sixth gear and I'm going 35 miles an hour. The bike is still fine. 25 miles an hour, fourth gear, completely fine. And I'm quiet too. That's another thing that helps with the police is you don't have to rev the piss out of these things to do anything. You're less likely to get noticed. And now to address something that I know will come up, obviously, when people are thinking about naked bikes as opposed to super sports, there's a pretty common argument that people who get naked bikes are just fat losers who couldn't be cool on a super sport. And to that, the most I can say is, you shut your mouth. So that's gonna about wrap it up for me here on why naked bikes are the supreme hog choice of sporty street riders. If you found this video educational or at the bare minimum entertaining, please remember to give the video a like, subscribe to my channel to see more content like it, and if you want to follow me on other platforms, I am on Instagram at trash.works, and I'm also on TikTok at TrashWerks. All I ask is that you do anything you can to help me escape the corporate work cycle hell. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one.